Yeah, I would say the number one skill set is you have to be curious is the number one. Number two is you have to be solution oriented. On a daily basis, there are issues, there's things that arise. And are you more solution oriented or are you someone who wants to sit in that realm of how do I solve this? Or are you looking towards the next steps? I would say the number three skill set for folks that want to get into engineering is you have to enjoy just being able to get into things that you have no idea about.
Welcome to Show Your Receipts, where we believe if you can see it, you can be it. Receipts are evidence or proof that something has occurred. Our guests are evidence that Black excellence is alive and well. They will be sharing their receipts on how they've been able to accomplish so much in their life. I'm your host, Tony Jackson. Let's get started. Welcome to Show Your Receipts, where we believe if you can see it, you can be it. Receipts are proof or evidence that something occurred. And so our guest today has an incredible background. I'm just going to read a little bit of his background. His name is Simi Odueyungbo. Simi is a consultant at Deloitte. His career with Deloitte spans just over a year. During this time, he's led major digital transformations as well as developing a client portfolio in an ACP account. Prior to joining the firm, Simi's operational excellence and process optimization across various chemical, engineering, mining, and technical companies. His success is founded on strategic vision, innovation, change management, business development, and core operational processes. Simi graduated from the University of Illinois Urbana in Champaign with a dual degree in chemical engineering and geology. Outside of Deloitte, Simi is an associate board member of Youth Guidance in Chicago and supports various community initiatives. He is married. He's a brand new father. He enjoys golf and supporting Manchester United. I want to welcome to Show Your Receipts. I want to welcome Simi Odueyungbo. Thank you, my brother, for being on here today.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. It sounded like a long catalog you're reading, but definitely humbled to join you on this show today.
And it's interesting that you started off that way, mentioning the word humble, because you are, Simi, we're just going to jump right into it. You're one of the most humble, but also most accomplished people that I know. Like when I talk to you, everything is, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do this. And so before we get into a bunch of questions that I have, let's jump right into it. Can you share with me, what does a consultant do? Because I know a lot of people, it's confusing. Are you secret agents? What's going on? No one knows what you guys do. What exactly does a consultant do who's consulting Fortune 500 companies like yourself?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a question that sometimes I ask on a daily basis, right? Is what do we do as consultants? The way I look at it is consultants, we get paid to figure out issues and to solve issues for a profit. If I'm, for example, McDonald's, right? And put in very simple terms, if I'm McDonald's in my top restaurant, we're doing well, but for some reason, drive-throughs in the morning, it's slow and it's cutting into our profit margin on a daily basis. McDonald's can say, hey, I need to hire a firm who this is what they specialize in, right? And make sure that operational efficiencies are realized. They're able to go into assess the situation and provide solutions that have been working across different industries and clients that are in similar or different types of profiles. So they'll call up some of the big firms like Deloitte, Accenture, McKinsey, and say, hey, you guys have expertise, you guys have the personnel, you have essentially the technology and the army behind you that can solve this solution that we're not able to solve in-house. So that's when they'll call the consultants and they'll give us a timeline, a budget, how many people can work on this project. And our job is to, within that given timeline and budget, solve the issue.
Wow. Okay. And so I actually have a little bit of background information with you being family. I hear and see some of the things that you do. It seems like travel is a big part of what you do. You're all over the country. One day you're in this state, one day you're in that state. How important is your ability to be on location and on site for your clients? And is travel a major part of being a consultant?
I would say that yes and no. There's the yes, as in the pre-pandemic consultant life, and the no in the post-pandemic consultant life. So when I break that down, pre-pandemic and pre-COVID, consultants were on the road in a given month. You're on the road maybe 3-4 weeks out of that month.
Oh, wow.
Where the client is asking you to be physically on site, their place of operations, their place of business, in order to, for two reasons: in order to interact with the people that are getting the work done, that see
Mhm.
those issues on a daily basis so you can address and solve it on a quicker basis. And then two, in order to move things quicker, you have to be where the action is. So we're
Right.
required to travel a lot. Post COVID and pandemic life, we've had to restructure the way a lot of businesses and operating models work. If you go to any major city, a lot of corporate and office buildings are currently empty, right? Because a lot of people are adapting to this more work from home lifestyle. In previous times when we're traveling 4 weeks out the month, now it might be 1 week out the month, or 1 week every 2 months that we're traveling, right? So the business and technologies are able to adapt to the ways of working, the ways that everyday business life is now, compared to previously where you physically had to be there a lot. So typically when we're on site with a client, it's for a major workshop, it's for a major milestone, it's for a new product that's coming out, and we want to have all hands on deck. But in this new environment, it's not as frequent as it used to be, right? So I know a lot of people had a lot of hesitancy prior to joining consulting because, oh, I don't want to be on the road for most of the year, right? I've got
Mm.
like a family, I've got personal obligations, to where the business, because of organizations that have adapted, you're able to do that lifestyle now because it's more of a work from home. On a daily basis, I might sit with the chief technology officer of Google, right? From my computer, from my laptop, as opposed to taking a flight to California. And that's also cutting a lot of operational expenses as well, which means companies have a bigger budget to be able to do more cooler work, hire consultants, and get to their goals a lot quicker as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. We're not gonna fiddle around. We're gonna get into the details of what people want to hear about, because the purpose of this show is to provide an example of success, of Black excellence, that may look different than what's typically promoted. We know that what's typically promoted is athletes, entertainers, all of these different things. And you have a very unique story, and I want to dive into your story. But before we dive into your story, I want to first start off with the main reason why I wanted to bring you on this show, and it was specifically because of the incredible results that you have and the incredible community that you have. And so I know you got married a little bit over a year ago, and I got a chance to spend time with you and your friend group. Shout out to all the Simi friends out there. We had a phenomenal time, wedding stuff. But what I noticed was I had never been around a group of friends like you had. Like, when I was around your friends, a lot of people were asking me questions about, man, Tony, what was it like playing in the NFL? What was it like playing in the big house? And I'm looking at them like, what is it like to be an engineer at Tesla? What is it like to be work this corporate job at Salesforce? Like, your friend group is incredible. All young Black men, pharmacists, doctors, engineers, consultants. I just had never seen anything like it. Can you share with me, why do you think that you have such a unique and successful circle of people with similar backgrounds?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, and appreciate that. Growing up, you always think the cool kids are the sports stars and the
Mm.
entertainers and the musicians. But I would say the number one thing is just the background and upbringing, right? Background wise, I'm Nigerian, right? So in Nigerian culture, as soon as you can start cooing and eating and walking and talking, you get programmed, good or bad, that if you're not a doctor, engineer, lawyer, you're automatically not a success, right? As you can imagine, growing up with that type of, hearing that on a daily basis and looking at the people around you, you're like, okay, I'm going to do one of these three things, right? And I remember my parents, the main reason why they said that is because honestly, you'll always have a job, no matter
Right.
what's going on in the economy, no matter what's going on in the outside world, you're always going to have hospitals open. You're always going to need something fixed if you're an engineer.
Right.
Somebody's always going to be trying to file a lawsuit if you're a lawyer. So essentially, and not just those three professions, but essentially focusing on a career and a profession that's sustainable no matter what the external circumstances are. So one of the basis for doing that was, hey, I need to just have a good education or a basic education in order to be able to speak the language of the world, right? So I would say all of my friends are college graduated. So they all went to some type of school, whether in the Midwest or South, but they all have bachelor's degree. Somehow, somewhere, we all have bachelor's degree, right? So we set that basic foundation that, hey, no matter what we're going to do in our professional life, we at least have some basic understanding. And from there, right, a lot of my friends, yeah, I went to University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, so Big Ten. I know, Tony, you went to Iowa, so I'll show the Hawkeyes a little bit of Big Ten. But in Champaign, right, not all my friends were engineers. I had a pretty diverse group of friends that some went to business school, some were the lawyers, some were in architectural science. So it was a pretty diverse range. Even going back to my high school days, I went to the Illinois Math and Science Academy, which actually just got ranked about a month ago, the #1 public high school in America. So this,
Wow.
yeah, so this is a high school where you have to take the SAT to enter high school, which is typically a college admission exam.
Yeah.
With that, I remember the guy who was living across from me, I saw him at a Cubs game about 10 years ago or 15 years ago for the World Series. He's retired. So he was one of the founders for Dropbox. One
Wow.
of the founders for Salesforce also went to my high school. We have about
Wow.
10 different Nobel laureates
Wow.
that went to that high school. So just being a part of that environment and that culture of just fostering just ideas. And we were talking artificial intelligence, for example, when I graduated in 2006 from that high school.
Wow.
And we're in
Wow.
2023, and all those concepts are really coming to fruition here
Yeah.
in 2023. I would say the number one thing is iron sharpens iron. So just being around positive people that are having the right types of conversations and not necessarily just opening your mouth and just talking, but just being a fly on the wall and just hearing how those conversations are happening. Two is just being self-motivated, right? Just coming to the realization that, hey, I'm 5'9". I'm not going to be in the NFL, unfortunately. I don't necessarily have the size for it or the skill set for it, but I do know that I want to be able to provide a stable income for my family, right? I still want to be able to take cool trips, right? So, what are the things I need to do? First thing is having a basic education and just a basic background.
Oh man, you touched on so many things, from the importance of the company you keep to the importance of education. Let me ask you this. If it's a young person watching this podcast right now, or somebody who may be even older who wants to potentially at least start down the engineering track, what kind of skills do you see that people typically have when they're following your footsteps? Are they very analytical? Do you have to be very detail oriented? What are some of the common traits that you see that require success in your profession?
Yeah, I would say the number one skill set is you have to be curious, is the number one. Number two is you have to be solution oriented. On a daily basis, there are issues, there's things that arise. And are you more solution oriented, or are you someone who wants to sit in that realm of how do I solve this? Or are you looking towards the next steps? I would say the number three skill set for folks that want to get into engineering is you have to enjoy just being able to get into things that you have no idea about. So as an engineer, one of the things that we do is we get presented pretty large problems that we have no idea how to solve. We have no idea how to solve those issues. So the biggest thing that we do is we get into our playbook and to figure out what's the issue before it, because typical issues, it's not the first time they've arisen. And so we look into a playbook and see, does this make sense? How do I solve this issue? And just be having that curious mindset, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, wanting to see what's next. And that goes back to the curiosity standpoint, right? If I'm hearing about AI as a young person, one of the things I want to do is, what is AI, right? I want to be able to, in engineering and in technology, technically you're always 5 to 10 years behind. If you're able to be 5 to 10 years ahead and predict things that will be upcoming in the future, then you'll be 10 steps ahead. And the last thing I want to touch upon is even just getting into engineering. People think that engineers these are like the nerds or the scientists that sit in the labs or at NASA, but engineering is such a widespread of, there's NFL teams that have 3 to 4 engineers staffed on their teams, right?
Oh, really?
Yes. If you go to any record label like Sony, for example, the music label, they're filtered with engineers that work at that label. So I'm talking more if you want to tie back the professional life with what's considered cool, the sports and the entertainment and the music, there's engineers littered in all of those professions. So it's not necessarily I need to be a genius in science or math in order to do it. You have audio engineers that can make sound incredible, right? You have audio visual engineers that can turn a 2D art painting into a moving art wall in pieces, right? For folks that are more into the arts and the sciences. I just want people to not to limit their thinking as far as what is engineering, because it is such a wide gamut, right? I graduated in chemical engineering, so I'm really focused on chemicals and the way you can get your products, the products that you use on a daily basis. So really the raw materials that go into those products. But there's also aeronautical engineers. There's aerospace engineers. I mentioned audio engineers, visual engineers. There's digital engineers that make art pieces cool, right? So it's really a wide gamut of folks that are into music, into creative, into science, into architecture. There's this growing space of, it's called literal engineers. So these are like books. These are audio like books. So they're transcribing papers from 6,000 years ago into audio visual format that can be used and consumed 10,000 years from now.
Wow.
So there's a wide gamut of space when it comes to engineering. And it's profitable too. You're always going to need engineers. You're always going to need scientists, right? Even in this new digital technology world that we're driven in, all those skill sets are still going to be needed.
So let's talk about that. You mentioned that it's profitable. Let's dive into that for a little bit, because first of all, I think that a lot of young people growing up, I was just talking to producer Nick about this, that growing up, I believed at 10, 11, 12 years old with 100% certainty that I was going to be a professional athlete. I had no doubt in my mind. And the reason was because I saw people on TV that looked like me. I knew people from my local area who had done it before. And so that was my belief system. And I believed that success would have to come in that realm in some kind of way. But what a lot of people don't know is that engineering and consulting can be pretty lucrative. I did a little bit of research before our conversation today, looked up on Glassdoor, and it says that the average consultant earns anywhere from the low 100,000 to the high 200,000 and could earn more. Could you talk to me a little bit about the opportunity economically that comes with being an engineer or parlaying that engineering career into a consulting career?
Yeah, we can talk real literal. We can talk real direct. I can give you some ranges, but overall, typically, I mean, I'll start with engineering and I'll jump into consulting because that's how my journey went. Fresh out of college, typically engineers nowadays, they'll typically make anywhere from 75 to 100,000 coming out of undergrad.
Out of undergrad. So you're saying this is just with a bachelor's degree.
This is just a 21, 22-year-old fresh out of college. They'll typically make anywhere from 75 to 100. Around my day, not to show my age here, but around my day, typically coming out of undergrad, it was anywhere from 50 to maybe 75. So you can see how times have changed over the past decade. As you start to move on, typically as an engineer, you could be a process engineer at a manufacturing site and work your way up to be an operations manager at that site, to being a site manager, a site director. So the whole manufacturing site, you're running the show, right? Once you start getting to that site director level, salary ranges anywhere from 150 to 200K.
Okay.
So typically typically takes around 10 years to get to that level of site management, site director, right? Jumping into consultancy, right? Consultants, usually you have different levels in that consultant range. People typically come in as an analyst. You work your way up to the partner or principal or managing director of that consulting firm, right? So even our analysts, when they come in, these are really undergrad, or it could be our interns fresh out, they'll typically make in the low 100,000. And then as they work their way up to consulting and senior consultant, that starts to level all the way up to anywhere between 150 to 175K. And the age range, these are typically 25 to 30-year-olds. Once you start jumping into manager, associate manager, associate partner, that ranges anywhere from 200. As a partner, it's a little bit unlimited based on how much business you're building. That can be anywhere as upwards of 300 to $500,000 a year on a daily basis as a partner at a major consulting firm. These are just broad range numbers, but typically this is what you'll see, right? So if you can imagine, there's some partners that are as young as 30, depending on how quick and how accelerated you are. But you can be a 30-year-old making $500,000 a year, not playing sports or in music or entertainment or things like that. But
So what you're
that to say, similar to sports, right? You got to put the work in, right? You have to make the right connections. You have to be a master at your craft. You have to be able to not only be articulate from a technical side, but more, even more from a people side, right? A sales side. Are you able to connect people, connect issues and solutions to people's personal feelings and the way they work and then the way they run? Because typically the people that you're interacting with, these aren't people that are fresh out of undergrad or fresh out of high school. These are seasoned professionals that are
Mhm,
C-suites, that are
mhm,
VPs at their
mhm,
organization,
mhm,
that were potentially consultants in the past.
mhm.
So these are people that they're experienced, they're known in their field. So as a consultant, you have to be able to, I call it, come with it. You have
Yeah.
to be able to provide them with something that they haven't seen or heard before,
Mhm.
or a different method or a different way to look at solutions, essentially.
Absolutely. So let's dive into that because it seems like what you're saying is it's a very competitive field. And that's why I definitely wanted to take this time during this conversation to definitely celebrate you. It's a big deal what you do. It's a very competitive industry. You present yourself very humbly, but I think that most people don't understand what you've been able to accomplish. And I was chuckling to myself when you're talking about back in my day. If you old, I'm ancient, you're still young 30s, but it's just impressive to see where you are right now at such a young age with basically your whole career ahead of you. And so I guess the question I have for you is if it's somebody who's watching this and they're saying to themselves, you know what, I would like to do that one day. What's the mentality they have to have? What's the background preparations? What kind of credentials and accomplishments do you need to even be able to get in the door? What does that whole process look like to be able to compete at such a high level and win at such a high level like you are right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the first thing is, I would say there's two different methods. So the first method is a method that I went with. So essentially, like I said, get the education, right? So a lot of, you have to think about what industry you want to get into and what you want to do, right? And when I think about industry, that doesn't mean you have to have your life figured out at 18 or 19. No, that just means you have to pick something and go with it, right? So
Mm,
whether it's you want to say, I want to major in finance, there's plenty of finance people that we do in consulting every day. I would say a quarter of my team when I was running a project were all finance folks. Or whether I want to be accounting, go with it. Awesome. Engineering, go with it. Awesome. But get that basic education, get that basic degree, right? While you are in school, I would say excel at school because a lot of what consulting firms, we do hire a lot out of undergrad. We get them in the door. They have the basic degree, they have the understanding, and we're able to mold them. But I would say excel in school. Make sure that you're joining social clubs. You're doing the basic things they did in order to get into college. Maintain those same things in college because as a consultant, we do hire plenty from college, right? So we're in college every fall, every summer, every spring, doing a lot of recruiting, and recruiting is big. So as long as you're able to show up at those recruiting events, get your foot in the door, talk to the right people, because 90% of it is networking. So if I'm a junior in college and I know a few consulting firms and a few companies are coming on my campus, I'm going to pick my suit, get my resume ready, and have conversations with those folks just to get in their ear and get in their stratosphere, right? Send follow up emails to those folks. Hey, thanks for meeting with me and letting me know a little bit more about the firm. I would love to have a follow up conversation. So you're starting to build those relationships because it's, as you, Tony, in life, a lot of life is relationship based business, right?
mm,
That's how you get ahead is you have those type of relationships and you're able to cultivate those relationships, right? Applying, getting your foot in the door, using your network. There's plenty of things like LinkedIn. You can see where everyone works now on
yeah.
LinkedIn. If you have a connection, message them, get your foot in the door. The second path, which is the path I took, was I got brought in as an experienced hire, right?
Mm,
Which means after undergrad, I was in organizations for a long time. I was in engineering companies, I was in chemical companies, I was in energy companies. I was essentially the client for so long that they wanted to
mm,
bring me in for my perspective being on the other side, right? So what we call that is just an industry experience hire. That means you've been the people we've been serving all these years. We want to bring you into the consulting side of things because you offer that view of, hey, you're the people that we work with on a daily basis, but come work for us, right? So it's either you come in at any point, whether it's an undergrad or post, or you're in the industry for a long time, you get that real world experience, and then you can come into consulting. There are different paths to do it, but the biggest thing is just experience and networking, right? So, for example, if I know somebody who's graduating in December and I know that they want to have consulting as a career, if they reach out to me, I'm able to put the bug in the air, make them a referral. I can be their referral if I feel like they have a strong background, but it's networking and relationships and getting your foot in the door, getting into people's faces essentially.
Awesome. And it's funny you mentioned that, Simi. So let me make sure, because we got you on record now. So let's say if some young person does reach out to me, say, man, I saw the interview. Can you connect me to Mr. Odueyungbo? I want to be a consultant. You say you'd be willing to communicate with this person.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. And so let's start from the beginning, because right now, this is for a lot of people, it looks like this is the end of the picture. You got this beautiful family, you got this incredible career, you got a lot of respect in the industry and what you do, a lot of autonomy. I know you're talking about being able to work from home. For a lot of people get caught up in the end result. But let's take it back to where you started. We know that you mentioned you're from Nigeria, you're from Shagam. That's my place. I've been there a few times. And talk about the journey, talk about the struggle, talk about what your parents bringing you guys to the US. Talk about you being born in Nigeria, being first generation, and that struggle process to go from having this vision that if you don't become an engineer, you're going to be a failure to starting elementary school and just going all the way. What was that like? Can you share with me some stories on that evolution?
Yeah, no. So I was born and raised in Nigeria. When I came into the world, I had two older sisters and parents. But I would say growing up, it was really the community and the village, so to speak, raised me, right? So my parents were always working, have medical background. So they're always in the hospital. I would say my mom raised the community. If there was a circumcision or a piercing that needed to be done, she was like the go to person for a town of over 200,000 people. A lot of community growing up, but we didn't grow up with a lot. We grew up with each other and the village and the community that we had. But one thing I always noticed when my parents worked hard, and I know my dad, he always wanted a better vision for his family. So he moved to the States, Chicago specifically, about 2 years before we did. And I know when he moved to the States, he moved to the south side of Chicago with four other grown men in their early 30s living in a one bedroom apartment in South Shore. So
Mm.
definitely what didn't start off with glitz and glamour, right? He did that for a number of years. And when we came in, he moved the family, me and my two other sisters in 1995. And we moved into, I would say it's a little shack in Harvey, Illinois. So I don't know if anyone knows Harvey, Illinois, but you can Google it. Some interesting facts typically come up, but it was a pretty impoverished neighborhood, to be honest with you. We didn't have much growing up. We'd all sleep in the same room, me and my sisters. And just growing up in that type of community and environment, one thing that we knew was we had a pretty good educational background. And that came from Nigeria, right? So I remember growing up in Nigeria. By the time I was the age of 2 or 3, we were already like numbers and words and all those things were already like advanced. So when I came to America, I remember I was in pre-K or kindergarten. I was in kindergarten for about 3 weeks. And the teacher said, yeah, we can't keep you here. So this is like my first 2 months of being in America. The
Mm.
pre-K said, we can't keep you here because I remember all we did was eat and take naps and eat cookies. And by this time I was over there like writing in cursive and the teacher was
Mm.
like, yeah, you can't be in this class anymore. So I lasted in pre-K for about 3 weeks and they moved me up actually to second grade. So they skipped, so they skipped
Wow.
kindergarten and first grade and they took me to second grade. And it was a little bit of a challenge even then, right? Because there was a lot of new country. I had an accent, still English, but I had an accent. So even from my peers, even though they looked like me,
Yeah.
I got picked on a lot
Yeah.
because I didn't sound like everyone.
Yeah.
On the Nigerian,
Your other cousins, they were
yeah, they weren't that nice, but
uh-huh.
I did always rely on my faith and my education, right? To the point
Mhm.
where I did well in elementary school, but my label was I was a class clown, right? So I was that kid who was smart in class, but I was very disruptive because I guess I just finished things. I knew what to do. So I was very disruptive, right? I mean, I think that kind of carried on throughout my whole educational career. Like growing up, I went to middle school in the same type of environment. And then even in high school, I went to high school for a year, a local high school for a year. And I knew that I know from an educational standpoint. And to be frank, I also wanted to get out the house. I grew up in I wouldn't say it was a strict household, but we had a lot of rules and guidelines. And I remember my summers would be spent at the library while other kids were maybe playing sports or outdoors with their friends. And I always got upset at my parents for that. But looking back now, I understood
Mhm.
why being in that type of environment, why they wanted to shield me away and let me focus on things that they could control, which is me being in a safe environment in the library and filling my time up with education and learning the ways of the world, right? Now I obviously value it now, but back then I didn't. But I wanted to go to a school that I can really foster my imagination. At the same time, gives me the freedom of my parents not being on my back on a daily
Mhm.
basis. So I heard about this school, Illinois Math and Science Academy, from a friend's mom she sent her child there. I did my research, pretty prestigious high school. I had to take standardized testing to get in. I fortunately did well on those tests and I went there. So this school is about an hour and a half from home. You live on campus. It's almost like you're going to college. You pack up everything, a TV, a computer, your clothes, everything. So I was out of the house at the age of 13, 14, right? And
Wow.
this means ironing my own clothes, making my own food, being independent, yet handling a challenging workload because it is a challenging workload, right?
Mm.
We're doing like AP calculus at 14, right?
Wow.
We're doing film studies. It was one of my class. So we're learning about like the 1920s era of filming and the
Wow.
1940s era of filming and the different styles and Alfred Hitchcock and things like that at the age of 14, 15, right? So I'm getting all these diverse opinions and knowledge, but at the same time, more importantly, I was around kids from all over the state with diverse backgrounds, right? Some people, they come from the richest and some people come from the poorest of poorest, but we all have this same underlying thread that like we want to be from an educational standpoint, we want more, we're hungry for more. So just being able to be around that environment, I would say it was a little bit challenging for me because, like I mentioned, the guy across from me retired because he found a Dropbox, right? And
Mm.
I'm like, these are the people that I have to like compete with, so to speak,
Yeah.
on a daily basis, right? So it
Yeah.
goes back to that iron sharpen iron. So you be in that environment to the point where even if you like suck or you fail, you still suck and fail at a pretty high level, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember even in high school, we had a graduation rate of 99.9%. And the one person just didn't want to go to college. They wanted to do their own thing and travel the jungles of South America for 5 years. And right. And that's okay. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
But just being in that environment to the point when I'd go back home, like on holidays or vacation, I'd look around my environment. I said, I'm so far removed from what I knew growing up. So,
Mm.
like, how do I fit into both worlds was something I initially struggled with. And then just going to college, I went to University of Illinois for one reason. It was in state, so I know it was somewhere close, but still far away from home.
Right.
And then two was top three engineering programs in the country, right? I know growing up, I wanted to be a petroleum engineer, and I knew Illinois didn't have a petroleum engineering school, right? They had a chemical engineering program and they had a geology program. So I just did both, right? Because I knew that's
Mm.
kind of the blend of both worlds. Even in undergrad, or even more of a diverse wealth of knowledge and thought and whatnot growing up. And then really when I finished undergrad, I went straight into the workforce in energy. So I didn't go into engineering. I went into more sales in energy. And it's the best thing I could have done. Doing that allowed me to marry like the technical intelligence with just being a people person and being able to talk to everyday types of people, along with technically like people that would blow my mind out of the water with they can get into some of these nuances. So being able to talk to people and relate to them on a more human level while still maintaining that background in engineering and being able to solve issues for a profit. And then I went into more of the mining world, right? So chemicals and mining. And I did that for a number of years and still maintain mentors that I talk to today. And then I went into technology and mining and then manufacturing and operations. And I've been in consulting for close to 2 years now. So being able to marry all those different disciplines and experiences into what I'm doing today, I think has really served me well. A lot of the partners that I work with on a lot of these big major scale transformations One of the reasons that they rely on me is because I keep it pretty simple. I have fun with it. So I'm not the guy who's in suits and making everyone feel uncomfortable on these hour-long conference calls. I might crack a joke and ask them how it is, right? Because at the end of the day, we go home, we have families, we have things that we like, right? But we
Mhm.
can still get things done in such a manner, right? And that's the way I like to live. Big rocks first, manage the big things first, and focus on the things that maybe we can do it at the end of the week. So just being more efficient in everyday life.
Absolutely, man. It's a lot to unpack there. You just glossed over some things, but I have to definitely go back and recap. Wait a minute, you came from Shagam, Nigeria. Father moved a couple years before to get everything prepared for you guys. 5 guys in a 1-bedroom apartment. You guys moved to Harvey, Illinois, which anybody who knows Illinois, they know Harvey. It's not the best place. Lots of crime, lots of poverty. And to make it from being a first generation, you're still a first generation. You were born in Nigeria, immigrating here to go from testing out of you're in kindergarten, they say, no, you're going to the second grade. You're skipping the first, you're going to the second grade, to then realizing that school was too easy for you, for lack of a better term, taking the ACT at the SAT at 13 or 14 years old. I didn't even know what the SAT was at 13 years old, taking it, killing it, and
Hey,
getting
by
it
the
to
way, let me pause you there. A funny quote. So I did better on my standardized testing going into high school than going into college. Same exact test. So that tells you enough. Apparently, I got dumber in college, in the high school. But yeah,
That's
continue.
crazy. They don't just let you keep the high score from back when you were
Oh,
13 or 14?
that's a score I used.
Oh, okay, okay. Wow. If that's not a humble brag, so wait a minute. Yeah, my high school score wasn't that good. So I had to just go back to my 9th grade score. That was better. Man, that's incredible to go through the track record of success you've had. Many people may be watching this and saying, I'm not I'm not the person who's in kindergarten and who's testing out to go to the second grade. I'm not the person who's acing the SAT at 13 or 14 years old. I guess the question I have for you is what would you say to a person who maybe doesn't have the academic and intellectual prowess that you had at such a young age, but who still has some of the same struggles you had with maybe growing up in an environment that doesn't have a lot of educational resources, and they don't have the academic support system or the examples of success? What advice would you give that person to believe that they too could follow in similar footsteps as you?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is use me as an example, right?
Mm,
I grew up in the same exact environments that a lot of the kids that you're talking about grew up in, right? So I would say the number one thing is just realizing what you want for yourself and what type of environment that you want to lead in the future, right? So you don't have to be, I tell you, Tony, to this day, I don't think I'm a smart person. Honestly, my wife would probably vouch for that and say, yeah, he's not a smart person, right? But you don't have to be the smartest person, right? One of the things that you do have to be is you do have to have a hunger for wealth and to have a hunger for knowledge, because you can have those conversations. You can be in a C-suite office, right? And you don't necessarily have to have the technical knowledge, but you have to just be aware of what's going on. One of the things that even my wife laughs at me today, even while I'm on leave, is I open the news every day and I read about 20 different articles every day, whether it's while I'm eating lunch or in my downtime. And it's just to be more knowledgeable and know what's happening, what the future of tomorrow is, right? What space, where can you play a space in the future of tomorrow? What type of conversations do you need to have, right? And it's even better now for a lot of youth compared to how it was, because all the knowledge is really in front of your face, right? All the knowledge is really in front of your face. We talk about AI, right? And the ways that you can use AI, right? I know I'll give you an example, even in my professional life today, right? I had one of our junior staff members who was working on my team. I've been working with him for about 2 months. I mean, he's fresh out of undergrad, still pretty young. And we're talking about his communication style, right? When he generates emails that go out to the client and different things like that, is just an area for improvement that we need to just focus on just to get you to the next level. You can even hear what I said. I didn't criticize him. I said, just to get you to the next level, here's an
right.
area of opportunity that we can
Mm.
focus on. And
I'm taking that. I'm taking that right there.
yeah, in 2 weeks' time, I'm reading some of his emails and I'm like, hey, someone's man, bravo. And you know what he tells me? Oh, I just use Chat GPT. As much as I want to say, I can't believe you put it into an AI program, I had to applaud him and say, you thought next level, right? Why don't I have
Mhm.
AI generate better emails for me in conversations, right? Obviously, I have to put some guardrails around that, around confidentiality and things like that.
Absolutely.
But all the tools are there for anyone young to be able to succeed nowadays, even more so than it was 10 years ago, right? There's a lot of different programs, there's a lot of different STEM programs. Even one of the things I'm on the board for, youth guidance, providing with youth in underfunded communities an opportunity to excel, right? And go to college, right? So there's a
Mhm.
lot of different paths and a lot of different opportunities, but you have to know, what environment am I in? Do I want this for my future? And
Mhm.
what are the small steps I need to do in order to get from A to B? Whether it's, okay, do I need to spend some more time in some after school programs, right? Or do I need to develop a mentor, which is always one of the top things I tell people, right? Find somebody who's going to be an advocate for you, find a mentor, that someone that, you like what they're doing, you want to get to where they're going and past where they're going, and get in their circle, get time on their calendar, get in a text thread with them. There's definitely support systems out there, but you just have to actually go out and reach for it, right? Because nowadays, right, you have 13-year-old millionaires, really 13-year-old millionaires. They saw a blueprint, they followed it, and they got after it, right? A lot of those steps are out there for people to achieve it.
Absolutely. You mentioned environment, you mentioned culture. Would you mind sharing with me? Let's have a conversation from that standpoint, right? Because you're a guy who's been in math and sciences your whole life. You've been a STEM guy since you were 13 or 14, right? From the schools you went to and in the group in the company that you were around. There's been a lot of conversation in how African Americans are underrepresented in STEM programs. And so what I'm going to infer is that probably means that you are oftentimes the only person that looks like you on a conference call, or the only person that looks like you when you're in a meeting or you're flying out to see clients. Share with me how you're able to thrive in that environment, because that's something that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people don't understand what it's like to be in an environment where no one else looks like you, but still be expected to thrive and show up as your best self. How were you able to go from Shagam 100% black to Harvey 97% black, to go from that background of the formidable years of your upbringing to now seamlessly transition to this other world that looks a lot different than you? How were you able to manage those things?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing is willing to be outside of my comfort zone, right? I would say just some life in general. The biggest way you grow is putting yourself in uncomfortable situations in order to grow from those uncomfortable situations. So if I'm doing the same thing every day, I'm not really growing. I'm just more status quo. So I would say
Right.
the first thing I did was I took myself out of the house and I went to a
Mhm.
board school, right? So I put myself in a very uncomfortable situation with, I think it was 7% black.
Mm.
It was around 30 something, 40 something percent Asian, 50 something percent Caucasian. So that was my first time where not everyone looked like me, right? It
Mhm.
was a very small amount of us. I really had to learn to the way I interact with folks, being in more of a melting pot environment. How do I stand out? I already stood out physically, right? Because I
Mhm.
didn't look like anyone else, but making sure that my voice wasn't diminished because
Mhm.
of that, stepping up when I needed to step up and talk, and even going into college as well, right? College was a similar situation. So I went to a PWI in the University of Illinois, where a lot of people, especially in engineering classes, if I had a class of maybe 300 people, there were four of us that were black, right? And we all sat together, right?
Mhm.
Because you relate to people that kind of look like you, and we studied together, right? And we face a lot of challenges, right? In that type of environment, even in college, right? Where a lot of people that didn't look like us didn't want to study with us, or
Mhm.
we were excluded from study groups,
Mhm.
right? We didn't have the test prep that everyone
Mhm.
else did because they've been passing down from their fraternity or sorority from
Mhm.
generation to generation. So knowing that we're already not on the same playing field challenge us to even go even harder, right? Because we
Mhm.
know that we had this mantle that we had to be the four black engineers that graduated from chemical engineering, because we know that there's going to be folks behind us. So taking that with pride, honestly, that helped translate to the professional work world a lot more seamless. I know I make this joke with a lot of folks that I know that went to HBCUs and for my HBCU listeners, I love you all. I'll always advocate for HBCUs, but I always tell them, I joke around with them, the world doesn't look like an HBCU, right? I want to prep myself ahead of going into that professional world. And I think going into a school like IMSA and University of Illinois definitely allowed me to do that. But once you get into that professional space, it's a whole different ball game in itself from
Mhm.
school, right? Because now you have money on the line, right? And now people have promotions, right? And now people have big teams and different opinions and different titles, right? And it's more that crap in the bucket mentality where to like, hey, I remember just to relate a story. I remember, especially in my really engineering, manufacturing, and process engineering life, I'd be in places that typically don't want to find yourself in the middle of
Right.
nowhere, right? I'd be driving through the backwoods of Arkansas, in Oklahoma,
Mhm.
in Texas, in West
Mhm.
Texas, just to
Mhm.
get to this remote facility, right? And I remember I was with a bunch of coworkers one time, and none of them looked like me. And it was lunchtime, and I said, before we walk into this restaurant, I said, hey, before we walk in, watch what happens when I walk in with you guys, right?
Mhm.
So I'll be in the back, but watch what happens, right? And
Mhm.
we all walk into the restaurant, and everyone walks in, and when everyone sat in the restaurant saw me, it's like all the forks and the knives dropped, and everyone said, right?
Wow.
And I was like, it was almost like they do exist. Yes, they
Mhm.
do exist type of thing,
Mhm.
right? But I was growing up in that environment. I had to act like it didn't happen and go right back to work, right? And but it was very uncomfortable, right? But one thing that I knew that definitely helped and for the generation coming is be yourself. People
Mhm.
are gonna like you the more authentic and the
Right.
more yourself that you are, right? So if you try to fit into this mold or try to fit into this mold, people are gonna call that out and they're gonna
Mhm.
see through that right away, right? So you already lost your credibility right away, right? So the number
Mhm.
one thing is just be yourself, bring your authentic self to work on a daily basis, right? And let me delve into that here in a second. So when I mean your authentic self, right? That means that if I like to keep my hair this shade with the beard, that's my authentic self. If I want to wear this shirt into a corporate environment, as long as it fits the corporate guidelines, I'm gonna do that, right? I have a tone of voice because I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I'm not gonna mask that. If I
Right.
have a Southern drawl because I'm from Georgia, I'm not gonna mask that. I'm bringing my
Right.
authentic self because really, corporations and companies, they don't hire you for how you they hire you for what you can bring to the table.
Mm.
How much money can you help me make or how much money can you help me avoid or not to lose, right? That's
Mhm.
why companies so bring focus on bringing the wealth of knowledge and what you bring to the table because all the other stuff is external and it's going to happen, right? One thing I always tell a lot of the youth that I coach and I mentor is there's only two things you can control, not even just in professional, but just in life in general, which is your work ethic and your attitude, right? Everything else, you really don't have a control over it. Why
Mhm.
let it stew? Why let it bother you? Why let it throw you off your track? If you could, if you can just focus on working on those two things, your attitude, and but what attitude is the way you respond to issues, right? The way you just respond to crisis, the way you respond to when things are going your way and when they're not going your way, right? Your attitude that you have towards your peers, right? And the people around you, right? And then on the flip side, the work ethic, right? I know I can work, right? So if I work on what I need to do and I accomplish my things, everything else I can't control. I can't control
Mhm.
my boss thinks about me. I can't control what Susan Q, who's the leader of marketing, is gonna say. I can't control when I submit my resume, who that person on the other line, what they're gonna think. I can't control that. So why delve into it and go down that spiral of trying to focus on those things, right? So that's what I always say.
It's man, you touched on some key things, but I want to dive into you mentioned the point about showing up, being your authentic self. And I am a little bit older than you. And I felt like growing up when I started my career, the whole idea and the concept of code switching and being able to code switch. For those of you who are watching who don't know, code switching is when a minority group of people adopt the vernacular and the mannerisms and the conversation of a majority group so they can fit in, so they can assimilate. I remember growing up and listening to my mom. My mom worked at a local college, and my mom. I used to always joke like I had two moms. Right? If I called my mom at work, she didn't sound like how she sounded when we were at home, right? Or if somebody called us, it was a bill collector, whoever called on the phone. It was like completely different voice. It was almost the idea that to be able to use your voice to make other people feel comfortable. It was almost like an extra skill set. And I'm starting to hear more and more conversation with people talking and sharing your perspective, which is the importance of being your authentic self. I just finished reading Elizabeth Liba's book, I'm Not Yelling, and she has a whole chapter talking about code switching. Can you talk to me about what gave you the confidence to be able to say, I'm going to be me, whether it's me wearing my African inspired garb, whether it's me wearing my facial hair the way I do. Growing up, I was always taught you got to shave all your facial hair off. You gotta do these different things to make people feel comfortable. Chris Rock has the joke with black women's hair, like when black women's hair is relaxed, white people relax. The whole idea of wearing your hair natural and doing all these different things, making people feel uncomfortable. Talk to me about how you develop the confidence to be able to say, I'm going to be me no matter what.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing I did for confidence building is I tried it. Right. So I tried it. Right. No, in all honesty. Right. So I had a lot of good examples and mentors of people around me they did it. So I would they'd allowed me to be in those spaces, and I'd sit on those calls, and they would have whether it's their locks on, and they're talking circles around the room, and they're doing
Mhm.
all these different things. Right. And I said, okay, these folks are successful. I can definitely do this. So I would
Mhm.
say that's the number one thing that definitely helped. Number two is as you get older, and totally correct me if I'm wrong, what you realize is a lot of the people that you interact with in the professional world, I mean, even on a daily basis, right? This is going to sound kind of crude, but especially people that are in very high positions, they're just not smarter than us, right? They're not smarter than your everyday people, right? There's nothing that really sets us apart as opposed to who we really are, the way you carry yourself, right? I've sat in the rooms with VPs and C suites, and I said, man, I can definitely do your job, right? No disrespect, right?
Yeah.
Part of this is tongue in cheek, right? It's I can definitely do your job, right? So why wouldn't I bring my authentic self, right? If my authentic self has got me this far and people like it, then why would I stop doing that? But the issue is if you never bring your authentic self, then not only do people not really know who you are, but you're not happy with yourself on a daily basis, right?
Mhm.
You're having to code switch, so to speak,
Mhm.
so much that you start to lose who your true identity
Mhm.
is because you spend a lot of time in the professional setting. And I know early in my career, I faced that challenge too a lot where I'd go back to Harvey, Illinois, and they're like, Simi, why do you sound like that person on a commercial?
Right.
Or like, why do you sound like you're being hired
Right.
like the police or something? Oh, I still have my like professional corporate voice on. And it just got to a point where no matter who I'm talking to, I just need to be me. It's
Mhm.
my friends that I went to college with, the professional aspect, or even the people I grew up with. So even I think the first step is realizing when you are code switching. And I think it gets to be pretty easy to realize when you start to code switch or people will call you out on it and just realizing that people don't care, right? It cares about what you can bring to the table, whether you're knowledgeable and whether your resume matches up with what's coming out of your mouth, essentially.
That is awesome. Simi, man, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. You can't be an engineer until you see an engineer. You can't be a consultant till you see a consultant. And when you see someone who looks like you, it gives you more belief. The accomplishments, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for all the gems that you've dropped. I was picking a lot of those up. And I hope that this recording inspires someone to follow down in your footsteps. If they do, they can reach out to us. If somebody was an aspiring engineer or consultant and they wanted to pick your brain or get information from you, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I would say the best way is via my personal email. So simiodu@gmail.com. That's simiodu@gmail.com. Or on LinkedIn as well. If you want to message me on LinkedIn, First name is Simi, Simi. Last name is Odueyungbo. So I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn or via email, pretty easy to reach out to. And I do try to respond as quickly as possible. But no, thank you, Tony, for having me. Great content, a lot of good discussions that we had. But just to wrap it up on my end, thanks for having me. For a lot of people that are watching, what we do, what I do, it might sound complicated, but it's really not. So just like I mentioned, having the right people around you, the right mentorship, being a curious individual, being outside of your comfort zone, right? So the quickest way to grow is to do things that you're not comfortable with, right? Going back, I'm a big sports guy, right? Growing up, basketball, right? I was always a right-handed dominant person. How do you get good at using your left hand? Start dribbling with your left hand, right? It's going to feel uncomfortable for a long time, and then it starts to get comfortable, right? Same thing that applies in anything that you do in life. In order to grow, get outside your comfort zone, do things that are uncomfortable, you'll learn so much about yourself. But thanks for having me, Tony. It was a pleasure being on this awesome podcast. Hopefully, people got a little bit of a nugget of knowledge today. So I just wanted to leave off with that.
Appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you, man. That's the pod.